our friend Don DeBar back in New York after, I'm sure, a very welcome visit to Havana in Cuba. Don, what took you to Cuba?
First of all, compared to New York, the climate is wonderful. We're freezing a little bit up here now. It's in the 40s Fahrenheit, and it was 85 to 90 at the beach outside Havana. I went to St. Mary's on the sea, and or by the sea, beautiful. But I was there. There's a group called a medical school called the Latin America School of Medicine that's based in Havana. The Spanish acronym is ELAM, E-L-A-M. And they celebrated the 25th year of existence. The school's purpose, described purpose, is to provide education to create doctors for people around the world that need them. The practical implications of this and the practice of doing so is a recruitment of people who are likely to succeed in the medical education, who come. They pay no tuition. They're giving minimum stipends to live while they're in Cuba, room, board, and the little pocket money. And their obligation is to, when they complete their education, to go back basically to where they came from and provide medical care for people who can't afford it. They do this across Africa, Latin America, some countries in Asia, and also for the United States. They push out 100, 200 doctors a year for poor communities in the United States of Americans that they take in and educate. Again, this is their 25th anniversary. I have a very good friend who is a graduate of the Cuban medical establishment prior to the creation of ELAM, who was one of the original faculty members and advisors when it was being set up. And they are in a very difficult situation now, the result of the aggregation of 60 years of sanctions. Medical supplies are very difficult to come by, and other supplies too.
The ELAM is famous here in Nicaragua, and Nicaragua has been the beneficiary of graduates from the ELAM ever since the revolution in the 1980s, and even during the period of the neoliberal governments, the 17 years of neoliberal government from 1990 to 2006, the Cubans continued to make an important contribution to the public healthcare system here in Nicaragua. A lot of people will be wondering, how is it possible for Cuba to continue making this incredible solidarity effort when the blockade seems to be, if anything, intensifying? Did people comment on the issue of whether things are getting more difficult to sustain this incredible initiative of the ELAM?
I was there from the week of the 11th to the 17th. There was pretty much a collapse of the electrical grid about a month ago. That's the result of the sanctions. There's difficulty in obtaining usable petroleum products. Venezuela has been assisting with what it provides, but in terms of refinery equipment, etc., the spare parts and also just the general use of other facilities have been squeezed even further. Joe Biden has been president almost full 4 years now, and the sanctions against Cuba may not have been increased on paper, but their enforcement has been ratcheted up tremendously, as a matter of fact. And so the pressure on the electrical grid, both the aggregation of it's now spent another 4 years of sanctions, and so another 4 years we couldn't buy these parts and those parts, but also just the increased enforcement meant, again, the electrical grid collapsed. The Cuban people are extremely resourceful, and they have been living under this condition now since January 1st, 1959, when the revolution came to Havana. And they got the grid up and running up about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago in most of the parts of the country, including almost all of Havana. And then the hurricane came through again last week, week before last, and Rafael, and that took down almost the entire electrical grid in Havana and areas to the west. So when we were heading from New York to Havana, we were told that the place, the B&B that we were staying at, had electricity. There was a question about whether we would have water because the municipal water grid was also affected by the power issues, the electrical power issues. You have pumps and things that have to operate off the grid. And that much of the city was still in the dark, meaning that, just getting food was going to be difficult because of refrigeration. The restaurants were going to be closed and all of that. By the time we got there, so the hurricane came through on like Wednesday, I think, or something. We arrived on Sunday. Then by the time we got there, about half of Havana was up and running. And by the time we were outside on Monday, most of it was up and running. There were some areas that went back out again, on and off for a period of a day or two. But by the time we left, everything was up and running. And in terms of how this impacted our trip, I really didn't see any negative impacts on, the places we went. We went to the old town, wandered from restaurant to, mart shops and all of that. Everything was up and running. The hotel where the conference was taking place was lit up. All of the international hotels were lit up. They have their own power supply, but they were also well supplied with the local things, and so were food stores. Gasoline lines, like we saw in the United States in the 1970s, were everywhere. There were, spots that came in and out while they were working on it, but in the main, the city recovered inside of a week from, very severe and unexpected hurricane that also, came on the heels of this other, general failure of the electrical grid. They're very resilient people, and the state, the way the people are organized, they're used to dealing with whatever the U.S. can throw at them, basically, and with dignity.
In terms of enabling the Latin American School of Medicine, the ELAM, to keep going, and Cuban society in general, I should imagine that international solidarity of all kinds plays an absolutely indispensable role. And did that show up at the ELAM conference for its 25 years?
Well, yes. I'll say in this way, this is the part that was evident because I was only in Havana and not traveling around the world for that week. There were people participating from all over the world. People from China, people from Russia, people from across Europe, people from Africa, and from like half a dozen African countries, people that I met directly and spent time with. Doctors, we're talking. And these are people who have already been through the program, who are established in practice, who are back, like participating in the ongoing, continuation of this project. And it was evident that this is, it has a global reach. So it's interesting too. I've been in the middle of a conversation with some people in China to help, sort of help out with some of the issues that they face with this school in Cuba. And, in the conversations that have taken place, I had a long chat with the rector of ELAM this past week about this project. In the course of preparing and engaging the conversation between the two sides, it occurs to me how, and the history of it, of course, better than I do, is that this program is an initiative of Cuba's, of Fidel Castro and others, including my friend Errol Maitland, by the way, who was one of the people that suggested this at a New York City meeting with Nelson Mandela, like back in 1992 or something. It is very similar to what China did with the barefoot doctors, after the revolution in China, when they had to try to provide medical care for people in the countryside and, train people who were not doctors to be medical care providers so that the needs of the people could be met. And this is, conceptually a similar thing without national boundaries. And, Cuba joined. Fidel, I saw a speech that Fidel made at Abyssinian Baptist Church in, I think, 1992. And this is the meeting that Errol made the suggestion to Fidel about getting people from the United States to go there also, from poor neighborhoods here. What Fidel had said at this presentation at Abyssinian Baptist Church was that on December 31st of 1958, it was on the literal eve of the revolution in Cuba, there were 6,000 doctors in Cuba. And within 2 weeks after the revolution, or some ridiculously short period of time, there were only 3,000. That the doctors, decided they were going to leave the country and, for greener pastures in the United States. This is even before the revolution had, bloomed and the socialist, content was evident in all of that. And so he then, said that now, and this is in 1992, they had 60,000 doctors, and they had trained, multiples of that for other peoples around the world. So the example of that is you'll have this, tiny island country with a population about the same as New York City's metropolitan area, 12 million people roughly, impoverished to the maximum that could be imposed by the global economy, and suffocated by the United States for 6 decades now, in a position to provide health care to people all over the world that apparently their own governments, many of them very prosperous, like in the United States, can't seem to manage to provide. As an act of solidarity to the world, as a model to the world, both of the nature of their individual societies and of the possibilities for an alternative to that particular society, this is a huge contribution to humanity. And by the way, to the few million people that get to stay alive or in relative health because of the efforts of the people that have been through the program.
Yeah, that's certainly the case here in Nicaragua. And the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people over the years have reason to give thanks for the Cuban solidarity and its medical solidarity. And of course, in large part, it was Cuba that made possible Venezuela, as well as obviously Venezuela's initiative, but it was Cuba that in large part made possible Misión Milagro, which has corrected the vision of millions of people in Latin America and the Caribbean. In terms of the United States solidarity, are people from the United States still able to effect helpful solidarity given the hostility to all those efforts and initiatives from the U.S. authorities?
Well, it certainly is complicated. The two most popular products in a relatively healthy international trade environment between Cuba and the United States, two products that there's much demand for among the population, if there were regular access, are Havana Club alcohol products, rum in particular, and cigars, Cuban cigars. They are the standard of tobacco product. It cost about $3 in pesos to buy a bottle of like a fifth or 750 mils, whatever it is, of Havana Club at the airport, at Marti Airport. And carrying it out in the open through customs in the United States in Miami, confiscated it, stern warning, threat of possible arrest if you try to do it again. It's a violation of the sanctions. So, there's a long way from here to normal. You go there and spend money. I don't know how that is or isn't sanctionable, and I don't know if I don't know how well it gets treated. I do know it's such an absurdity that it's not something that you can intuitively, work your way around. Well, this is probably a problem. This is probably okay. There's no rhyme or reason to any of it. It's a very hostile environment, and this is not Trump's presidency. This is Biden's. So, I don't know what will happen now. We brought down medical supplies, and that apparently is okay. There's medical supplies that came from MDs or someplace in the city, and were delivered to ELAM. And this is sort of a regular. I won't say how regular, I don't know, but it wasn't a novelty. There was a procedure and stuff. It goes and it's straight through. There's no shenanigans. It goes right through customs and whatever. So that kind of assistance, I assume, as de minimis. I mean, you got 12 million people. So let's start with, how do you bring in how many shipping containers full of aspirin for 12 million bottles of aspirin? Just so everybody has a bottle of aspirin on their shelf, or a box of Band-Aids, or the things that we take for granted that we don't even realize we own, that they don't have access to. There are shortages of antibiotics, of insulin, of some very fundamental drugs, antihistamines and such. And it's it's really a pathetic contradiction. It's pathetic in the way it reflects on human beings. That this system that produces some of the most advanced medicine on the planet, like say a cure, but an effective treatment for lung cancer, for example, a genetic based treatment for lung cancer, other antiviral drugs that are novel and very important, and strictly the creation of Cuban medicine. And side by side with, we'd love to give this to you, but we don't have a glass that we can put the water in for you to wash down the pill. It's like that, and how to remedy that, I don't know. I don't know how you can't do the things that people are used to doing almost everywhere else, where they can send remittances, like relatives from Nicaragua that are in the United States can mail money or wire money to their relatives, and there. I assume that's still possible, and that's not possible with Cubans at all. You have to, if you can bring the money in, fine. They want to know how much you have. They want to know. They're watching all of it, and they want to starve the Cuban people. It's not even subtle anymore. It's effective in that it's hurting them, and it's failing because it's actually hardening their resolve.
Yeah, in relation to support for Cuban society and the economy in general, did you get a feeling in your conversations with people in Cuba that there's a sense that they're able to count on support from China or the Russian Federation? I saw a report of 80,000 tons of diesel fuel being shipped from Russia to Cuba to help with their electricity generation. Did you get a feel from people there that they can count on a reasonable level of support?
I got a mix of opinions on that. And the people that I'm dealing with there are people that are pretty connected. They're running med school, or I have some friends who've been involved in the political establishment there too. Some openly acknowledge, with great gratitude that and see promise in expanding that stuff, and appreciate the solidarity from China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Nicaragua, elsewhere. But there's one person who's of the opinion that, this is a global struggle for power and empire. These are just competing, the new empire and the old empire. That China may be nice today, but they just want to take out, gain a superior strategic position over the existing empire so that they can rule the world instead of the Americans or whatever. I don't subscribe to that, and most of the people I spoke with don't either there. But I'm also reporting that that's part of it. I have no idea how prevalent that idea is. Very prevalent is the understanding and appreciation for China and Russia, for the BRICS, for a number of the other Latin American organizations in CARICOM and all of that. This is really the where the future lies for everyone in the region. The consolidation and protection of the sovereignty of the individual states and of the groups. And they see the primary and perhaps sole antagonist being the United States. I think that's the most prevalent view, and they see their relief coming from China and Russia and some of the others I mentioned, particularly Iran and Venezuela.
Did you get a feel of the importance of the other Caribbean countries in supporting Cuba, like the countries of CARICOM? Was that important at all?
Yes, specifically CARICOM, as a matter of fact. I heard that mentioned a number of times. Up here, even, speaking with you every week for like 10 years or whatever, about, what's going on right around there, which includes CARICOM. It doesn't play a very large role in my world. Like, I don't hear it mentioned very often if I walk out of my house or whatever. Even, walking around Haitian or Jamaican neighborhood in Manhattan, whatever. But there it is a very big thing. Among people that we're talking about, how to where to look for relief for the med school and how to, deal with some of the various economic issues, who's working on what, et cetera. CARICOM figures very large in people's minds in Cuba. It's important. It should be, right? I mean, that's the neighborhood, and those are the people that are standing up in the neighborhood. So.
Yeah, and another related issue is the issue of Cuba's relations with Africa. For example, in South Africa, Angola, they owe a huge debt to the Cuban government for facilitating the liberation and the defeat of the apartheid regime.
Yeah.
And Angola's a big oil power. And South Africa's a major economy with all the problems that it has.
I met doctors from Mozambique and from Angola and from South Africa at this school, and from Chad, and Burkina Faso, and from another country, Cameroon, at this convention. And there were lots of other folks that appeared to be from Africa, from their garb, and they were talking to each other in different languages that sounded to me like with accents from some of the African countries I'm familiar with. So I think that this is a practical expression of Cuba's efforts in Africa. Their role in helping both the revolutionary process and in Angola and in Mozambique, and the role that played in ridding South Africa of apartheid and of the example that provided the world. I mean, this is this dinky little island with 12 million people on it that are, forced to endure all kinds of nonsense because of the United States. going around the world and saying, look, this is not good for these people. Let's do something about it. And rolling up their sleeves and laying down their lives and throwing their bodies at the empire. The example of that alone to me is one of the most valuable contributions that anyone's made in our lifetimes to humanity, because it shows that no matter what the other side can do to us, we have the ability to resist and even to change the relationship. And so the impact that's had on the individual countries, rather than unemployed, reserve labor, miners, etc., across some of these countries in the interior of Africa, you have doctors in Havana at a conference. Because it's not enough just to help them free themselves. It's also, let's share what we have. Like, here's this medical expertise that we have. Come on, we'll share it and take it out and share it with other people. That's kind of their engagement in the world. I think it's an organic solidarity. It's something that I don't think you can teach in school or treat with drugs or surgery. It's something that's like comes from the human soul in a way. And I'm not really big on metaphysics, but it's something that seems deeply human. That is, it's inspiring to see it.
One last question, Don. I'm a tremendously prestigious pharmaceutical medical technology industry. That seems to be one of the few things, apart from sugar and rum, that offer it a good possibility of developing strong economic relations with other countries and a strong exchange of technology. And how important is that to Cuba now?
My exposure to the entire, I'd say the industry of medicine, as opposed to the the profession, but rather the infrastructural aspects of it, was minimal, almost nil. Conference dealt with the various areas of practice that they offer training in. They had workshops on, say, nanotechnology. I mean, these are things that bear on your question, but they were dealing more with the particulars of the science of it rather than the business or whatever of it. So, I mean, obviously, those things that are the foundational infrastructure of various aspects of medical science are essential to conducting medical practice. And those things that they have are extremely valuable. I don't have any information about any of it, unfortunately.
Although you're very clear that things in Cuba are extremely difficult, and it's good to know that you also feel that the Cuban people are able to continue their resistance and show the same resilience that they've shown over the last 60 years. Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing that experience with us, Don.